Okay.
How are you doing?
So what's your name?
Greg.
Greg?
Yeah.
Paul?
Greg, Paul, Dina. Dina.
Dave.
Greg, Paul, Dina, Dave.
And Ron.
Ron, I'll never remember this, but Greg, Paul, Dina, Dave, and Ron.
Just before we start, it might be quite easy, I think easy on everybody, is if you want to group into a small area here, rather than being spread out, it'll probably be...
Would you guys stay in the same order? Because
No, I mean,
notes
stay,
if you want.
you're fine here, just people on the outside, just move in, so you kind of narrow space.
Here, you guys come. Yeah, this is good. And you are? I'm Jen. Jen. Yeah. Rob. Jen, Rob. Natalie. Natalie. Dave. Natalie. Paul. You are?
Jimmy.
Jimmy. Where are you from?
I'm from Port Orchard.
From where?
Port Orchard. Just across the water.
Gee, your accent was a bit different for a minute. A bit New Zealand for a minute. Sorry. Jonathan? Noel? Tech. T-A-K, Tech. Okay. Jen. See, Jen?
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay.
This is always expected.
Okay. So we're going to start this by... Do you all know how to do these? Because I don't.
My
So
first one.
you all tell me how you want to do
We
it.
ask you the questions and then you tell us what you think.
Or I could ask you the questions. That could be really
That
fun.
would be fun.
Uh-oh.
Depends. We could play Truth or Dare, spin the Evian bottle.
Yeah. So who wants to go first?
I'll go. I was just kind of curious on your collaboration with Trent Renzer, how that all came about and how it was to work with him.
It was great working with him. I'll tell you how it happened. I just really liked his stuff. And he had met my manager and said that he liked what I did. So we kind of sent messages back and forth. When I finished Past the Mission, it wanted him to sing on her. She said, I want Trent to sing on me. I said, I'm sure you do. And she said, so, get him. And I said, well, I don't know if I can do that. And I made a call, and we hung out. And I played him the song, and I went up to the Sharon Tate house and hung out for a little while. And we got on really well. We became, I don't know, good acquaintances.
What's that place like?
Well, it's torn down now. They tore it down from what I understand. I couldn't cook chicken in that place. I tried to make everybody dinner because they're all so emaciated. And so I tried to make them chicken, right? And I make chicken very well. I mean, my mother's a Southern cook, so I can make chicken. And it just didn't turn out. It didn't cook. And I called my mother and said, Mom, what's wrong? And she said, well, the heir to the Folgers coffee died there. And I think it's cursed. I said, thanks, Mom. So anyway, I have a terrible reputation in his eyes for cooking chicken. He thinks I'm just, lying about that. But he's an interesting one. He's a very deep guy. And very sensitive guy. It was kind of sweet, all these devil books around the house. I was giggling. I'm going, you didn't have to do this for me. And he laughed because he's such a, with all that darkness and all that stuff, he's really a lighted being, He's
Sure.
very...
He probably just vents that side of him through his music.
Well, he goes into that to expose it, I think. He goes in there to expose that part of us that we hide, that we've judged. Like, no, I'm not going to look at this side of myself. So he goes in. He sweeps that from underneath the rug. That's kind of his forte, shall we say.
What do you do when you're writing a song? Do you feel like you have to tap into something, or do you work at a melody and words come? How does it work for you?
Usually, you're tapping into something. Because if I could just do it on snap of a finger, I'd be putting out a record a lot more than I do.
Sure.
It doesn't... I think if you look at a lot of other writers and their work, the consistency isn't usually there. and you don't know why. You can't explain why it's not there. Some people had it more than others, like a John Lennon. Some people could consistently write things that were, like Neil Young. The guy has a career that doesn't stop.
Right.
Joni Mitchell was like that for a long, 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 long time. If you look at how many great records she
So
put
you feel
out.
like the song just comes and then you're in the vehicle of making it.
Well, there's a balance. There's an inspiration that happens, and then you're like a sculptor, then you start sculpting. Because, say one line comes to you. Usually it comes together, music and lyrics. Usually they come together. Then you have to decide what direction you're going to take it. And there are hundreds of directions you can take it. So you have to sit there, and sometimes I finish it and it goes, I hate you, I hate you, bitch. And so I'm sitting there, oh God. And I have to tear it down again and start all over. And
Does the song usually take weeks or days?
sometimes months, sometimes minutes. Leather took like 8 minutes. I was so pissed off. It depends.
Right.
Does it take a real deep situation? Because I know your songs are pretty, your pieces are pretty, you know, some of them are really intense. Does it take you like a certain situation that really needs to come out, that you really need to vent? Or is it something like an accumulative type of...
Well, those things can happen, but I might not write about them for a long time. I mean, I might be walking down the street eating a banana, and then I write that. It's like you store it. You store things as a writer. Every moment, everything you see, you store. If you're present, if you're like that, then you're not even aware of what's happening to you. You know, it's so funny. I watch certain people that talk about wanting to improve their writing, and they're not on the earth. Their feet are not on the ground, meaning they're somewhere else. They're always 2 weeks ahead of themselves or 3 weeks ahead, complaining, bitching, whatever. So caught up in stuff that they're not even watching what's happening in front of them. There's like this poem happening right in front of them at the next table, and they're missing it. That's one problem, though. I'm not really a good date because I'm usually I'm a bit of a busybody. Because I'm always observing things. I mean, I'm watching what people are doing, and more than anything, what they're not saying. What they're not saying is far more interesting usually.
A question on two of your B-sides. What helped you do, number one, Love Like Teen Spirit, and number two, your Cherokee version, Home on the Range?
Right. Well, Teen Spirit was kind of the thing where when I heard it, the piano just said, you know, I want to play that. I really want to do that. I mean, it was like, you know, I've got a good interpretation of that. And I said, yeah, I'm sure you do. It's like, no, I really do. And I'm tired of people just putting cheese on me and thinking, you know, that I'm like a coffee table. And pianos do kind of get that reputation. They get a reputation that your Aunt Emily plays them and stuff, but that's about it. So I think for the piano to have a reading on, I don't know, I consider Teen Spirit probably the theme for this decade in a sense. I think it will be remembered as that maybe 50 years from now. I think so, if I were a betting woman. So I didn't, if you're going to do something, you got to pick your things very wisely when you're doing covers. You got to be kind of 2 steps ahead of yourself. You do things that are challenged. That was the male response to this decade. And I thought to do a female response, besides like Me and a Gun, which I felt was probably the strongest thing I'll ever write. But I said, you know, I think that the female response should be the same song. It should be the same thing from a different perspective. That's all, because the song was so genius. And their interpretation, of course, was rage. And I thought there needed to be the feminine rage.
A question for you. I have it written down. You said that Cornflake Girl and The Waitress and Bells for Her is kind of a triad about violence amongst women and how women interact what do you think the role that men play is in that violence? What do you think that that is? Or do you think it's just a strict woman against woman thing, or do you think it's men or somehow?
Well, you know, guys I think would like to think that they're involved, but sometimes it's not about a guy. Sometimes it's just hierarchy. It's not always fighting over a man, but sometimes it's self-worth between women. Now, maybe there are relationships that have come into play that have made the woman feel bitter. Like maybe she's with a man that's abusive. I'm remembering the situations of some of the women that I had a falling out with. Maybe one of them's career hasn't been what she thought it would be. So, however bitterness happens, maybe a man is involved sometimes, but sometimes they're not. Indirectly, I guess. But I think that it's kind of I don't know. It's kind of too easy to blame them, because it's so easy to. Do you know?
It's so common to.
That it also takes, I think, responsibility away from how we treat each other. Because women can really dog each other bad. It's shocking to me. In my interviews, it's the women that I usually have, not the men. I can deal with the guys because a lot of times it's much more upfront. I know when they're trying to dog me. I know when they're trying to nail me. And I'm like, you know, especially the English guys, I'm like, Frank, you're so obvious that you want to nail me in this piece. Why don't we just go have a cup of tea? It'll be much more fun. And if you want to nail me, I think I could do a better job than you will. So I'll help you do it. Make it funny, at least. But the women act like they're your really good friend. And they get in and act like they really care. Maybe about personal things, health things, violent things. And then they'll turn around. And my jaw will be on the floor. I can't believe that it was a setup. And it's happened much more with the women than the men. And so I'm very wary of professional women journalists because, you know, it's a different league. Don't take this the wrong way, but the ones that write for the major papers in the world, they're very different. And you know what it is? I think they think to be competitive, right? They have to show the men who's tough. Which is really, really sad because strength doesn't come from manipulating another person. It comes from writing a really objective and clear and strong piece.
I've always felt that you could kind of, if you don't know someone, you could kind of tap into them a little better if you go through their CD or tape record collection.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, if I happen to go and look at your collection right now, what might you be listening to?
You'd know I get a lot of free CDs.
What would you go out and buy?
Well, it's real important for me to have like a library of different styles because that's how I keep my vocabulary stretched as a musician. I don't listen to one thing. I can't because you're always clocking what's out there. And I don't listen to one thing too much because you don't want it to get ingrained in you that you copied. So I'll listen to something a few times and I'll go, that was very quick. They're very quick. And you hear what they've done, and maybe they've done something that inspires you to do something, you know? But it's not one thing I listen to everything. Everything.
How do you write? Where do you sit when you write? Or how do you prepare?
Do you know, if it were that, you know, if I could do that, my life would be so easy because I wouldn't have to be thinking about what am I going to do next. It's constantly, I mean, you ask a lot of the other writers out there that you hear from once and you never hear from again. I mean, we don't need to mention names, but you hear a record once and you never hear from them again. If you could just tap into that, like go to the health club. I know how to get rid of this if I want to, but I do like Haagen-Dazs a little too much, and I do like pasta. And you know, if I had to, I don't know. If I had to quit music, I'd love to work in a pasta kitchen. I mean, you know, as long as I could eat. The thing is, I know how to go to a gym. There's steps to do that. There are not steps in writing a great song. There just aren't. I don't believe that you can formulate it if it doesn't come from an inner place. I think people smell deceit. I mean, you know, John Lennon said once that he would listen to songs he loved and try and rewrite them, but from his way and his experience. And I mean, I could never guess where Eleanor Rigby came from or where, you know, Revolution came from. I don't know what song he was trying to copy, but I haven't been able to figure it out yet. Whether that's your kind of like you challenge yourself by going, okay, I'm going to rewrite this Metallica song at the piano, and nobody will ever know, and like change the melody and change this and change that. So all you have really is an essence, but then you take it somewhere else. I think there are writers that do that, but if it doesn't come from a place inside yourself, I don't think there's magic there. I could write like a song right now for you, but 99% it won't have any magic. I just can't do that.
Besides John Lennon, who flipped your switch?
Jimmy Page. Yeah. Big time. Huge influence. It's funny, nobody knows that everybody goes, you know, all these guitar players come and go, whoa, I can't tell that you like Jimmy Page, man. And I'm like, well, I don't say this to them because you can't. But he came up to me and said, I had the privilege of meeting him a year ago, and I said, you've been such an inspiration to me as a piano player. I studied you, and he said, I've listened to your records, Miss Amos, I know. And I said, thank you, Jimmy. And that meant more than anything, because that's what I did as a piano player. I studied guitar players.
How did you approach the second album? Was there a lot of pressure from the industry as far as, they say, you know, first album you've got a lifetime to prepare, and your second album is a year later or whatever.
Right.
Was there pressures coming, different pressures than the first time?
Well, I don't really pay any attention to the industry because I learned years ago, I think from Why Can't Tori Read, how how menial the whole process is. You can't believe in it for a second. You're dead if you believe. That's a cartoon. And if you believe otherwise, then that's very foolish. And you're going to have to learn a very painful lesson. Because I remember after Why Can't Tori Read walking into a restaurant, and I heard these snickers. You know, my hair was up here, and I had on my plastic thigh boots and stuff. And I was walking in, and I knew the record was bombing. Billboard had just called me a bimbo, but this was a restaurant I went to, like, all the time, and a lot of music people went there. And I heard these kind of snickers, and I went up to this table, mentioning no names. A guy in the industry was sitting there, and he wouldn't bring his head out of his menu, and he like shooed me away like a bad disease. And I said, I kind of got the vibe that people were laughing at me. And I went, right. I'm going to walk out of here with dignity. And I walked out of there. It was with the greatest gift, really, because from that night on, I went home and I took off my plastic boots. Not that plastic boots are a bad thing, but it was symbolic for me.
Sure.
I still have them. And I got a piano that week. And I understood what my intentions were. Why I make music, which is very different than being famous. Two different agendas there. My other goal was to be famous when I did Why Can't Tori Read. I was desperate just to be liked. And I think a lot of people that want fame don't understand what they want. Not until you get it. You really don't know how empty that is unless you know what your intentions are. Because I lost my intentions. And they became again to make music that inspired me, whether one person sat in my living room and listened to it, or 100 people. So when I went around to making this record, I had had that experience before falling on my face. And I knew what it was like when you do things for the outside and to please other people, to get a hit record. For radio, I'm going to write a hit. Hit records are songs that loads of people like, or that radio plays. Doesn't mean it's a great song. Doesn't mean any of that. Doesn't mean it moved anybody. Doesn't mean it changed anybody's life.
So a great song is something that moves you or has
Moves me and maybe will move another person. If it moves one, if I can touch one person in an audience that night, then I've done what I wanted to do. Because I can't expect more than that. But if I haven't touched one, then I usually feel really bummed. But to finish this very long-winded answer, but it's an involved one, because when I came to this album, it was much more about, God, how can I challenge myself now? I'm a piano player. I'm not going to go be Polly, although I love Polly dearly, and Polly does what she does great, P.J. Harvey, and I wish I could be as good as Gardner as she is, but I'm a piano player, and I knew that I couldn't try and make a record that wasn't me, so I just accepted that Little Earthquakes was the first kiss. And a lot of times after people have the first kiss with you, they want to kiss your friend. They want to kiss the next girl because, they know how you do it. Mm-hmm. And that bores them. And I figured those kinds of people will fall away.
So you consider your early work being more right in the industry than from the South?
The early, yeah. But before that, I wasn't. That was my middle period. That was after 7 years of sending out my tapes and them telling me this girl and her piano thing is not going to happen. And I believed them. What happens to you? I don't know if you all have experienced this. I don't know what your goals are or anything. But if you're sending out your work, whether it's 2 months of rejection, 2 years, it was 7 years for me, which broke my back. And I couldn't take the rejection anymore. I started to believe. I doubted my ability. Which is, of course, if you do that, I'm not going to say it's a mistake. It's painful, but you'll have to learn from that if you doubt yourself. Questioning is one thing, but to doubt yourself and say, I'm not enough because they want this or that, and you change yourself like Houdini to be somebody else that doesn't come from you. If it comes from them, then it isn't yours. Do you know what I mean? If you change because it's a metamorphosis, then that's one thing. But if you're going, oh, they want blonde. Oh, they want this. Oh, they want romance, and you're a science fiction writer. I mean, you really should leave it to the romance writers because they're really good, those women. Do you know what I mean? They sell 5 million copies, some of them. They know what they're doing. If you're a science fiction writer, you should really write what you know how to write. I wasn't Lita Ford. I had delusions.
Isn't there an irony in this, though? Because now you have all these fans, and everybody wants a copy of what
Yeah, it's really funny. My dad's smiling because he has like the only copy.
How much was they worth? They were like worth a couple $100.
Yeah.
How do you feel about your fans? And I talked to someone who said that they sold that CD for $180. I mean, how do you feel about?
I think it's
You
hilarious.
think it's funny?
Being called a bimbo on that record and really dogged for that record.
And now the fact that it's selling for $200.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but Sgt. Pepper's doesn't sell for $200. And there is kind of a strange... But see, I really try now to be myself. And I don't always know what that is because it's constantly changing, you know? You're always discovering new parts of yourself. But as a writer, I try and put those things in my work. Sometimes, like if you meet me now and you met me later, you'd see another side to me if we were just hanging out, because I'm a little different when I'm on. But in my work, I try and not show you who I think you'd want me to be, but I really allow myself to be who I am, and that's great freedom for me. So when I look at the past, when I wouldn't allow myself to do that, and it made me very, very ill inside, it made me really sick. But there are times when I can't show those sides, because if I do, I'll get ripped to pieces. When I show certain things to the British press, they fucking nail my ass. They nail my ass.
Notorious.
Nailed. But at the same time, you know, I would say to one of them, I go, you know, I sat for 2.5 hours with you, and we really talked about this stuff. And if I told the world what you said to me at that lunch about your experiences, and she said, Tori, you got 2 full pages in this paper. Don't even talk to me about it. 2 full pages. You couldn't have bought that for £150,000. I said, that's not what I'm talking about. And she goes, that's what I'm talking about. You call me in 6 months from now if this hurts your career. Well, it hasn't hurt my career, but still, I won't have lunch with her again. But you know what I'm saying. It's a very, very crazy thing. You see, there are very mixed messages here. So you kind of have to have a very constant sense of humor.
It must be extremely difficult.
Some
Because I've
days,
seen some really horrible interviews, you know, little paragraphs after interviews with you, and it's almost like, you know, you would think that you'd be kind of sick of wasting, you know, giving your time to these people. Do you ever feel like you're being kind of shafted, or it's almost a waste of your time sometimes?
sometimes. Sometimes I am, but I also know that when you get those comments in there that that's their chance. They don't have any other outlet. They're not writing books. They're reviewing my thing. So they don't have any other thing to do. And sometimes I go, you know, I really wouldn't want their gig. Because I can go out tonight, and I'm going to do Telly tonight and sing to 8 million people. And that speaks for itself, I think. And I do know that an interview it's only half me, it's half the journalists filtered through them. It's 50% them. And the public, especially the British public, they're very cynical about journalists. I mean, they'll sit there, a lot of times when they dog you, it goes in your favor because people get so protective. It's really strange how it works, because if they look bitchy or if they look, you know, you're just kind of rolling your eyes. The best journalists, I think, are the ones that can be, if they're adoring you, it gets a bit boring. And if they hate you, it's boring. And a great article, I think, is objectivity. When you can come from an objective place, whether you like the music or don't like the music, can you write an objective article? See, I could go see somebody tonight that might not be at all my cup of tea, but I could understand maybe what they're doing, and if they're doing what they do well or not well. And sometimes you have to give it up to certain people, whether you like them or not. If you don't like a comic, but he has the ability to enthrall, say, 2,500 people for 2 hours, you might hate this comic and what he's saying. But can you sit there and understand his ability to do what he's doing? You see, there are many levels of performance, and there are many levels of, I can dislike something,